Right, let's talk about Coach of the Year, because the market for this, the odds have been getting very, very interesting over the last few days, and a new favourite has emerged off the back of Sunday Night Football. Los Angeles Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh, Coach of the Year. Are you having it, Brian?
Who has it better than Jim Harbaugh? Than the Harbaugh?
Nobody!
Than the Harbaugh brothers will. And so we're filming this. We're going to break down the fourth wall. We're filming this live. And then on Monday Night Football, you will have the Harbaugh brothers going against each other, which is a replay of the Kaepernick Lights Out in the Superdome, Ravens Super Bowl in New Orleans. Speaking of the Superdome, this is such an incredible matchup for the NFL. And it's one that we haven't been talking about because we've been talking about the Detroit Lions and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and the Bills. This is a cool matchup, number one. But we're not talking about it, Will, because of John Harbaugh or Lamar Jackson or Derrick Henry of the Ravens. It's because Jim Harbaugh is doing what most people did not, including me, did not think he would be able to do. You're going to be really good with San Francisco. You're going to leave. You're going to go to Michigan. He had issues at Michigan. He finally gets it right. Then he has serious issues with the NCAA, ends up leaving Michigan at the very last second possible. Perfect timing by Jim Harbaugh, by the way. Goes to the Chargers, who had underperformed. Justin Herbert, big contract, huge arm, but, has some issues. Is not the best quarterback in the NFL. Jim Harbaugh's taken all that, and he's just brushed it aside, and he's made it work. And the guy who wears khakis, the guy who drinks milk, he eats steak. Like his whole diet is whole milk and steak. He's doing it. He's doing it, and he is. There's no way around it. We could get into Mike Tomlin or Jim Harbaugh, or there's Jonathan Gannon. There's several other coaches to get into. But Jim Harbaugh right now, if I'm voting, he is my Coach of the Year at this moment.
And look, I think what's really fascinating from a Jim Harbaugh perspective is the culture that he's created. Because you can say a lot about the play on the field. And actually, this Chargers team are giving up the fewest points per game on defense of any team who've installed a new head coach in the last 2 decades.
That's a heck of a stat.
Which, by the way, number 2 on that list, the 2011 49ers with Jim Harbaugh the year that he took over there.
It all comes down to culture.
But he does have this reputation of a little bit of a Jose Mourinho type, where he comes in, riles them up, gets everyone going, and then 3 years later, everyone's fallen out with him.
He burns you out, and then he leaves town. That's what Jim Harbaugh does.
So the question is do they need to be successful super quickly, this Chargers team, or have they got time to build on that culture? I got a chance ahead of this game to speak with Tuli Tuipulotu, the emerging pass rusher of the Chargers. 6.5 sacks over his last 4 games on a line that's got Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. But I talked to him about, there was a great story last week about Jim Harbaugh on his first week in the building, in his khakis, drinking his milk, jumping into the cold tub with the players, showing that he was just one of the guys.
Which is awesome.
And it turned out that Tuli was one of the guys involved in that incident.
I actually remember that because I was literally in a cold tub with him. So it was pretty funny. But man, very unpredictable.
I mean, what's a moment like that for you? You're a second-year guy. You're still getting your feet under you, and suddenly this national championship, NFC championship, potential Super Bowl head coach suddenly is jumping in alongside you, fully clothed.
I mean, it's just funny, man. I just feel like. I feel like he doesn't feel like he's the head coach. He doesn't feel like he's above us. He feels like he's with us and with us and like a part of this team. Like, I don't know, deeper than just being the head coach. I feel like he's actually has a connection with us and we're comfortable with him.
So a deeper connection, they feel comfortable with him. And then actually, like, we did this a bit with Dan Campbell last week, but I do just want to quickly show a bit of his post-game. I know that this is a bit staged, and they let the team media in and everything else.
He's like the cool dad. He's the funkle. That's what Jim Harbaugh is.
And in no way is that more demonstrated by the fact that rather than game balls, Jim Harbaugh's giving out high fives.
I wanted to hate him at Michigan. And I watched that, and you get why players like to play for him, and they give their all. He gets the best out of his teams. He really does. Yeah,
and listen, there were a couple of really telling moments in that for me. He talked about being a signature win, which for me clearly means he's hearing that noise from the outside. Yeah. This Chargers team look good, but who have they really beaten? Well, now we've beaten one of the best teams in the AFC, even if their record doesn't reflect it. And by the way, we've got the Chiefs in a couple of weeks. That's very much in his mindset. It's the fact that he talked a lot about the way that they won and the way that they looked like they were going to let the Bengals back into the game and sealed it late. But it was the reaction particularly of Derwin James for me, who Derwin James has been one of the best defensive backs in the NFL over the last decade, except injuries have hurt him and being on bad teams have hurt him. He's a guy who, based on talent, could have gone to 3 or 4 All-Pros by now. Did you see how fired up that man was that he was finally on a great team with a great coach and a great defense?
All he got was a handshake. He didn't even get a game ball. He just got a handshake, which tells you that it's working there. Let me ask you, we dealt with this last week with the MVP, and I was sitting up here going on and on about it was too early to give it away. Coach of the year, same way, because it's tight. We have to let this thing play out. But if you had to vote right now, is he your coach of the year, or are you going with somebody else?
So the other one that has to come out right now has to be Mike Tomlin.
Yeah.
Because when I saw those Steelers appointments at quarterback, when I saw that they brought in Russell Wilson and they brought in Justin Fields, I thought that the level of quarterback play just was never going to reach the heights
in a division
where
you're going against Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
You're probably not winning that division.
And only one viable wide receiver on the team, who is a very up and down guy in George Pickens. A line which wasn't at the level it has been in previous years, although has emerged to be now. And a defense that we know is excellent, but has been banged up, had problems at second corner. There was a lot to think about the Steelers team that they would fall off this year. And yet every year I think the Steelers are going to finally not hit 500, have that losing record. They suddenly emerge out of nowhere. To win that game against the Ravens this weekend, despite missing 2 or 3 of their key pass rushers, yes, they still had TJ Watt, they still had Heiberg as well, but for them to go and win that game in the fashion that they did, despite having to score field goals because they couldn't get it done on offense.
6 field goals from Chris Boswell, absolutely fantastic.
And despite the fact that he made that tough decision at mid-season to say, Justin Fields is clearly playing well enough. We are a playoff team with Justin Fields, but we could maybe, if I can just get a little bit of Seattle Russell Wilson out of him, maybe we can be a Super Bowl team.
Is Mike Tomlin making you a Russell Wilson believer with this team? Because last week you were not on the Russell Wilson train.
And then he didn't have a great week this week. They settled for 6 field goals at the end of the day against one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. So Mike Tomlin has to be up there for me. Him and Jim Harbaugh. I think Dan Campbell's going to be very heavily talked about, and rightly so. This team is 9-1 and flying in the NFC. The dark horse I like, a guy who's kind of got into the top 5 of the betting in recent days, though, is Jonathan Gannon with the Cardinals, because they've got a really good chance of winning that division now. Everyone else is 5-5. Everyone else keeps beating each other. The 49ers keep beating themselves. There is a real opportunity for a team where, not quite a no-name defense, but outside of Budda Baker, I implore the average NFL fan to have named 3 other starters on that defense going into the year. They rotated in 23 players last weekend on defense. That's an astonishing number. And yet, they are beating teams in all phases. They are getting impressive wins over divisional rivals. I always think Coach of the Year, it's an award that Bill Belichick could have won about 10 years straight and didn't win. It's an award that Andy Reid should have maybe won the last 5 years straight and hasn't won, because people like it to go to a story. They like it to go to a team who have been
it's
built
a coach
up
has
from...
turned it around, who's
exactly.
come in. You're not going with chalk, right? You're going with somebody who has a story, who has a narrative. Mike Tomlin fits that perfectly. Jim Harbaugh fits that perfectly. I don't think the Cardinals will be good enough in the end. To me, right now, it's a 2-coach race between Jim Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. That's another thing, though. You mentioned the division and the Chargers. If the division is still in play in the AFC West, and the Broncos are in there a little, but could Jim Harbaugh, who we weren't even talking about a few weeks ago, could they make a run? They're good enough to beat Kansas City. Could they make a run? And then all of a sudden, Jim Harbaugh is back in the playoffs and maybe playing his brother John in a divisional game. This season is only going to get better. It started kind of weird, and it's really starting to go to that next level right now.
If they beat Kansas City and at that point haven't dropped another game, and then you look at the rest of the schedule and you see Kansas City have to go to Pittsburgh on Christmas Day, and they have the tiebreaker on them. You maybe talked me into the idea that the AFC West isn't off the table, which I don't like. I'm not having it. I think the Chiefs will still win that division. I just think the 1 seed is back in play.